I loaded the I just loaded the PowerPoint onto Dropbox, so I apologize it wasn't on there before, and so you guys will have access to it. You can print it as you need it. I just want to say, Ricky and I spent a lot of time congratulating each other, but I really loved the lab. It was so much better than I've been involved in different trainings for these tests, and that one was really great. You guys really got a lot, I think, with that. So here goes, if I can make my PowerPoint work. So you notice I put in parentheses the ambitious agenda. So we'll try to get through all this stuff, okay? The first part I want to do a little bit of review, just to kind of connect the dots with what we've already gone over and how it relates to tonight's topic. Primarily, tonight's about phonemic awareness a lot. It's about phonological processing, okay? And included in there is phonemic awareness. So we'll talk about the theory and a little bit of the research and stuff. We're going to do a little bit about the CTOP. Ricky's he's got his computer, and we're going to do a little demonstration on administering the CTOP, which is the comprehensive test of phonological processing. Right? It's what you guys will be using. It's the most common measure for phonological processing. Yeah, in there you see the PA, that's the abbreviation for phonemic awareness. So number 4, the phonemic awareness intervention. I've got some stuff in here about that. In report writing, I'm trying to, I think I want to keep bringing this stuff full circle for you guys. How do you include this information in your report? I just grabbed a report I had, and I just and cut and pasted some of it out of there, and so you can see how some of what I put in there on that. And then down at the bottom, number 6, the 4-part processor. That was that triangle model in the second of tonight's readings. Okay, and that, if we don't get too far into that, next week we'll cover that in depth, because really that alphabetic anxiety article, that was the part I was more focused on that. I wanted as sort of an intro to that 4-part processor. And so we'll do a little bit with that, but then next week we'll talk in depth about that and different studies that support it, and there's a lot of information around that. So here goes with our agenda. This is part of the review. Remember this, I love Nancy Mather, versus the IDEA definition or the New Mexico Administrative Code. I like Nancy Mather's definition of a specific learning disability, right? A specific learning disability refers to basic psychological processing disorders. That's what the CHC factors are measuring. That's what the WISC is measuring. That's what the CTOP is measuring, okay? So really, that's what this class is really built around, is that stuff. So when you have deficits in these psychological processing areas, that interferes with your ability to acquire basic reading, basic math, basic writing, different academic skills, okay? It's not an overall intelligence problem commonly. It's commonly not a reasoning problem. It's disorders in these basic processes, okay? Again, I want to try to our goal, my goal for you and your goal as a diagnostician, is not just to do an evaluation. It's not just to do a report. It's not just to find out if the student qualifies or not. Ultimately, I'm sure you've heard me say it several times, ultimately the goal is to help somebody succeed academically. That's the real goal. There's all those steps that lead up to that, but the goal is that. And so that's why I put up there from the CHC factors, the Cattell-Horn-Carroll factors, how do we go from that and assessing that all the way to IEP goals that actually will result in that student catching up, okay? So, learning disabilities, they're linked to cognitive processing, okay? Our processing assessment is organized around all the instruments anymore. They're organized around the CHC factors, okay? That's what they're all measuring. 80%, I was thinking about, 80% of evaluation referrals are reading related. And so I sat at my desk today and I was thinking, I do between 80 and 90 evaluations a year. And so, whatever the math is, whatever, right? If it was 100, right, that would mean 80 out of 100 would be reading related. I think that number's too low, honestly. I think it's more like 85%, right? It's above 80% are reading related. there's not that many referrals I get that aren't reading related. They're actually quite rare. And so I would push it up closer to 90, really. So we need to, that's why we're going to talk a lot about phonological processing, phonemic awareness, phonological memory tonight, because those are integral. They're the foundation of your reading acquisition. Okay. Most reading problems are related to phonological processing deficits. Okay, and so you see the dots connecting up there, right? Most of my referrals are reading related, and most reading problems are phonologically grounded. Okay, so we need to, you guys need to understand that. Assessment results should inform the intervention goals. That sounds like sort of like an obvious statement, but that's really the goal, is that with this current valid high-quality assessment, that you supply the IEP committee with everything they need to write a goal that directly targets where that student's weakness is. Okay, so that's the review part. So we've been talking about, these are the primary, right? There's more in the current model of CHC. There's the 16, but these are the 7 are the ones that are measured by the WISC and the WJ, and these are the ones that you'll be, when you're administering the test, you'll be measuring these. I want to focus primarily on auditory processing, but I think Peter asked a question about, he's like, well, is this verbal stuff, is it an academic skill or is it a cognitive skill? Because it's being measured on both sides of the line. And all this stuff, you remember maybe on the first night or the second night, I had that quote from John Horn where he said, you can't separate this stuff out. If you pull one string, you're going to pull a bunch of them. And so that's going to happen tonight also. Even though I really wanted to focus on auditory processing, well, the CTOP, it is phonemic awareness, right? But the other half of it, or the other third of it, is phonological memory, right? They're both phonological, but one is auditory processing, one is short-term memory. So just automatically, right from the start, we're already you see how we're pulling 2 strands in right there? And then also, we probably won't cover tonight on the CTOP, is the rapid naming, which is long-term retrieval. And so it's real difficult to just isolate out any one of these things and not eventually talk about the others. There's a lot of overlap between them. Okay, so primarily it's going to be the auditory processing stuff, but we're also, we can't help but address the phonological short-term. Okay, so here goes. I think that in my experience in working in the schools, at this point I've worked in 11 different elementary schools in 2 different states. And so I've interacted with a lot of teachers who've gone through a lot of preparatory programs, special ed teachers, regular ed teachers, reading interventionists. Almost universally, there's a lot of confusion around what is phonological processing and what is phonics and phonemic awareness, and there's a lot of this lack of clarity between these different concepts. Okay, and so I want to, hopefully we'll clear that up tonight. Right? And so the phonological processing, I picked that picture because the phonology, the way I explained it at the IEPs with the families is, if you think about a telephone or a phonograph or a symphony, it's about the sounds. All those, that's where all those things overlap, and it's that auditory stuff. So this is a little bit of a you guys probably are getting to know me well now. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but I think you know how I am. I'm the free associator, okay? That's me, all right? I got an email from, and I can't really say too much about this since I got an email from a friend of mine who's an attorney, okay? And I had emailed him because his case was in the paper recently. And so I said, hey, you got any comments about this? I cut and pasted the stuff from and this is what he sent back. This is part, he just sent me back what his I don't know what you call it, his brief or his appeal or whatever that he was submitting to the court, okay? This is hot off the press, okay? This is still, so I tried to make it as anonymous as possible. So I'm just going to read it for you. There's no evidence or question in the record suggesting Dr. W. somehow, having arranged for the test to be performed in order to render an expert opinion, simply skipped the essential step of interpreting its results. That's what you're going to be. You're the interpreters. okay? When you're out at the IEPs, your job is the interpreting, okay? And so I want you to be, my job is to get you ready. So when you're there interpreting the test, and the CTOP and phonological processing and phonological awareness and phonological memory, you're going to know what you're talking about. You're going to be ready, and you're going to be able to tell the committee in a way that they understand. So then it goes on, nor is there any suggestion that Dr. W is not qualified to properly interpret the report, including the specific language contained within the report that the court remarked in its ruling it did not independently understand. I love that. The court's like, we didn't understand this stuff, right? And so somebody needed to do a better job. I guess it was Dr. W. I took his name out, which is interesting because, you know, David Wexler, and for me, it wasn't David Wexler. You know, this is something separate from cognitive assessment. Okay, but boy, to me that really applies to this class and to you guys and to being a diagnostician. You're going to have to be able to go out and interpret this stuff, and so I really want to give you as much information as I can. Okay? Has anybody ever seen this graphic before? Have any of you guys? This is a real, it's a famous graphic that's been around in education for a long time. Okay? And I had a copy of the picture, but I never knew where it came from. Okay? And you know, I've used it, and I have it as a slide for my IEP presentations. Okay? And I really like this because, you know, we're going to pull out phonemic awareness, okay, and phonological processing. But there's a lot more to reading, and so I just want to make sure that I don't want you guys walking out with a tunnel vision thinking, oh, reading equals phonemic awareness. Because there's all these other things that are involved in reading. If you look at the top half, that's like Peter was asking about the language stuff. That's more the language end, okay? And see, Amy raised her hand, our SLP. Right? Boy, there you go. There's SLP, there's what, you know, what SLPs measure, but also, as Peter said, on the WIAT and the WJ achievement, we measure a lot of these same things too, not in as much depth as the speech therapists do, but those things are measured, okay? So that's definitely a very important part of reading, okay? Then if you go down below, there's where we're going to be more tonight. You can see the phonological awareness, right, on the word recognition end. Remember, the simple view of reading is your ability to decode plus your language comprehension. Okay, that's the simplified view. Well, that's the two strands there, really, right? Can I take meaning out of what I read, and can I decode the words? So we're going to focus down below there on the phonological awareness stuff. Also, you know, I think, you know, Ricky and I have tried to, you know, because this class is really organized around the CHC factors. You know, as you look down that, you can see the top half, there's GC, right? All the different aspects of GC. Down below, phonological awareness, there's GA, right? Decoding, sight recognition, GRW. You can see a lot of the different CHC factors reflected in that also. And so this is from this woman, Hollis Scarborough, okay? And the second reading from tonight, the alphabetic anxiety, is from this book, the Handbook of Early Literacy Research. I got this book. You can find it used because there's a third edition that's out now. That's the second edition. I got this book for, I don't know, like 99 cents online used. And so I encourage you guys. I don't agree with, you know, about half of this book has stuff that I really don't agree with. Hollis Scarborough's article is in there, and that's where I couldn't believe it when I turned the page, and there was the rope model. There it was. There is the origin, where it came from. So if you guys get that book, you'll have that also. All these, was it Angela? Angela, when I were talking about, and she has ordered some of the books for the class. All of these books that our different readings are out of, you know, we've cherry-picked, you know, various chapters here and there. Almost every one of those books has multiple chapters that are very worth your time and very much worth reading, this one included. Okay, so what is phonemic awareness? The ability to hear and manipulate the sounds in spoken words, and the understanding that spoken words and syllables are made up of sequences of speech sounds. See all that, the sounds, okay? Can I hear them? Can I discriminate the sounds? Can I then auditorily, without the letters, can I manipulate those sounds, okay? And for the little guys, right, and even for some of the older kids, just the understanding that our words are composed of individual sounds. When we speak them, we co-articulate them. We don't say them one sound at a time. And so really you need direct instruction to focus your attention on that. Okay, so learn, Noam Chomsky, all these people, these Steven Pinker, all these language people, our brain is automatically set up to acquire language. All you have to do is kind of interact in a language environment and you start to acquire language. It doesn't require conscious effort and instruction, okay? Unless you have a language impairment, right? But phonemic awareness, because we co-articulate our words, we don't say each sound. It requires instruction, and we have to consciously focus the kids on that, okay? People don't attend to the individual sounds or phonemes as they produce, or, as we speak or as we listen. We're not speaking individual sounds, and we're not hearing individual sounds. We're hearing co-articulated whole words, okay? And because of that, that's why phonemic awareness is not a natural thing, and that's why you need instruction to focus your attention on that, okay? Instead, people process the phonemes automatically, okay, directing their attention. This is straight from the Marilyn Adams reading, okay? They direct their attention to the meaning of the whole word, right? Instead of, they're not thinking about the individual sounds, okay? However, I like this lady, Uta Frith. She's this German reading researcher. She has this great quote. I love this quote. Where she equates the acquisition of the alphabetic principle. And the alphabetic principle is that our words are made of individual sounds, and we represent those sounds with letters and groups of letters, okay? So she equates alphabetic principle and phonemic awareness as like catching a virus. This virus infects all speech processing, as now whole word sounds are automatically broken up into sound constituents. Language is never the same again, okay? That's right, well that's what's happening. Instead of just being able to hear it as a whole burst of sound, now all of a sudden I have this awareness of the letters, and I'm beginning to be aware, and the two things start to be reciprocal, and they help each other. My awareness of the letters and the spellings, and that helps me to become aware of the individual sounds in the words. So what is phonological processing? You can, and here you'll see there's this. I'm trying to be clear, not unclear. But this is the difficulty with some of this stuff. In Dr. W, the specific language, remember that in that thing? Well, now it's phonological processing. It's not phonemic awareness, okay? And I was talking earlier about how I was involved with this group at National Institute for Literacy, and I got drawn into a witch hunt, and I was given the pointy hat, okay? And you know what I mean? And boy, it really, in having to fight for my life around this issue, it really focused me. What is the difference between phonological and phonemic? Okay, and because I certainly didn't learn that in my preparation program as a diagnostician or as a teacher. Worked 8 years as a reading teacher, as an ESL reading teacher. Phonological, words are phonological units, okay? Syllables are phonological units. Onsets and rhymes are phonological units. Individual sounds are phonological units. There's different scales of phonological units. One scale is the phonemes. Does that make sense? Okay? And that phonemic awareness, when we get down to the level of the individual sounds, okay, that's the important part for your reading acquisition. Is you've got to be able to discriminate those individual sounds, and you've got to learn which spelling, which letters our code attaches to those sounds. Okay? So I intentionally put up phonological processing because there's different levels of it, okay? And I want you guys, you need to understand there are kids that have levels, and on the C-top, it starts out at the level of syllable, okay? We'll see later this evening. It doesn't start out at the level of the individual sounds, it's the level of the syllables, okay? And so you've got to understand those different levels of phonological units, okay? The phonemes are the most important ones, but you work your way there. So you can hear the sounds, you can manipulate the sounds, okay? You can discriminate between similar sounds. That's a real problem for these kids, for anybody that's struggling with, basically anybody who's struggling with reading acquisition. Speech sound discrimination has been found over and over again to be a real challenge for those people. And I've got a great YouTube video we'll see that has a little bit of information on that. Ability to rhyme sounds, okay? You'll see on the Wyatt, later on when we get to the Wyatt, it won't be too long from now, there's rhyming activities that the kids, questions where can they do rhymes, okay? I guess KTEA also has rhyming, also right, WJ, I guess, right? So ability to, and now see here, now we've crossed the line. I had to rearrange these, okay? I was fiddling with it today. The ability to store in memory the sounds. Okay, now we left GA and now we're over on GSM, right? The memory, the short-term memory, okay? They're both phonological, but one is switched over and we're in the memory side. I believe that's real important. Have I clearly stored those sounds in my memory, or are they fuzzy and overlapping with the other sounds, okay? And then this one, can I clearly and quickly remember the sounds? See how we're on the memory side on the GSM? This is really the GLR, the long-term retrieval even, right? And if I've got them clearly and distinctly, this is this sound and this is this sound, okay? And if they're real clearly represented and distinct in my memory, then I'll be quicker and more able to recall them accurately, okay?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, because reading is so closely tied to hearing individual sounds and manipulating individual sounds, what are the implications for students who are deaf?
That's a great question. That to me is one of the great mysteries. How do you teach deaf students to read, okay? They do, and I cannot answer that. They have to have some other modality as far as I can tell, but
there's a couple people in here that might be able to address that, and Amy or Margie, could you add anything to that?
It's pretty much just, I've always just been on the interpreting side, but when I've gone in with students, we pretty much, you're going to use pictures, you're going to use signs,
see non-phonological.
Conceptual accuracy, and that's what we go with a lot of, because with a lot of what we're teaching is, especially the conceptual accuracy, because if you go with English, we have a lot of words that we don't use. In ASL, there are a lot of words that we don't use because it's just like extra stuff that we have because of the English grammar.
Yeah. So. I actually, and maybe you guys work in APS, my daughter's friend's mother, Joanna Lucero is her name. She works at APS. She's in charge of the deaf ed stuff. And so she sent me and I have it, I could forward it to you, Chris, if you want. She sent me an article once, a PDF on how do you teach deaf children to read, but I never read it. So I can't, was there another, yeah?
A long time ago, I worked at Del Norte, and they had the deaf and hard of hearing program there.
Yeah.
And one of the interpreters, I had taken sign language too. And most of the deaf children that we have there had some level of hearing when they were young as a baby.
Yeah.
And those had language before they became deaf, and so those were kids that use ESL, the English is a sign language. Yeah. Where they convert, like Margie's saying, English into sign language, so that there's a sign for like the word is, the state of being. ASL, those kids are the ones to wonder about. Yeah. Because they've never had that sound. Yeah, well, the kids that are born deaf, and I bet they're the ones that totally don't have this phonological situation at all. I think it must be more logographic, more clear, literally whole languagey, where they're learning whole units instead of the individual sounds.
Yeah, that was my undergraduate degree, was the deaf ed and the ASL. And the ASL is the language, and without that piece, it is very difficult to learn how to read, and you have to have that language base. And that's why that ASL piece for those children that are born deaf is really, really important, so that they have something to anchor the further academics on. I've got it in here. We'll see. We're just going to see a few minutes of it, maybe 4 or 5 minutes of it. There's a video, a YouTube video, and you guys, I've got the PowerPoint is loaded up on the Dropbox, and so the link is in there. This woman, Nina Kraus, who's at this auditory research lab at Northwestern University. We're only going to, the talk's an hour and a half long or something, and it's really incredible. And so she does talk about that. Cochlear implants for these kids that are born deaf,
and she does these studies, when they got their cochlear implant and how that affected their literacy acquisition, if they got it, basically around birth, or if they got it at 1 year old, if they got it at 3 years old, and it significantly impacted their literacy acquisition. And so I encourage you guys, if you want, to pursue that video, because it's really, really worth it. Okay, so this is from University of Oregon, and University of Oregon is where Dibbles came from. Okay, I really like. They have a section on their website. It's called Big Ideas in Reading. Okay, and so if you look on here, this is and I put my title on there, from phonological to phonemic. If you look up at the top, those are big phonological units, whole words. Okay. Then rhyming words, right? Sentence segmenting, syllable, finally syllable segmenting and blending. So we're starting to get to a finer grain size in there, right? Onsets and rhymes, blending and segmenting individual phonemes. Finally, you see down there, we're down fully at the individual phonemes. And you can see how they have it labeled from easy to more difficult. It's easier for the kids because it's more like natural speech to do word comparisons, okay? And Amy can talk to this, is the thing where they do this, card and cart. Is that the same word or two different words? Okay, and some kids can't do that, right? And so there's a continuum from phonological to fully phonemic on there. And they have more. That University of Oregon, the Big Ideas in Reading is a really good website. Okay, all right. So what is the difference, right? I hear every IEP I go to practically, I hear somebody scrambling that they interchange the term phonics and phonemic awareness. They use them as if it's the same thing, but they're not. They're very different, okay? Phonemic awareness is not phonics, okay? Phonemic awareness is auditory, okay? That's that auditory part, right? It does not involve the printed letters and words. Okay, that's it's the awareness of the sounds and my ability to manipulate and discriminate the sounds or the whole words. Okay, for the phonemic, it's the sounds. Okay, however, and this is when you add the letters in, it's like that Uda Frith thing. When you add the letters in after once they have an initial the concept that our language is made up of all these individual sounds. Once you add those letters in, it really helps them. Now they have this a concrete thing that they can anchor that as Marilyn Adams said, the elusive phoneme, right? They can anchor that elusive phoneme to this thing, the letter, okay, or the letters, and they really both that speeds your acquisition on both sides at that point. Okay, this one, there's a lot of research that's shown that poor readers do less well on phonemic awareness than on other cognitive tasks, right? And that's what we've been talking about. It's not a reasoning problem, okay? All those other, there's a lot of other stuff, the fluid reasoning and the GC and different things. The phonemic awareness is separate from those, okay? And so I think it's it's very important for you to understand, and even more important for the families and the students to understand that a phonological awareness problem that's interfering with your reading acquisition is not related to your reasoning abilities and to all these other ones that they're distinct from each other. And that's why you'll get the kids. I get the kids when they come to me for a dyslexia evaluation, and the kid has an IQ of 147, right? I'm like, are you sure this wasn't a gifted referral, right? But their reading acquisition is down here at the second percentile. All right. 80% of poor readers, this is from the research, 80% of poor readers are estimated to demonstrate a weakness in phonological awareness and or phonological memory. See, again, there's that line crossing thing going on, right? There you go, right there. So if 80% or more of my referrals are reading related, and 80% of those kids, it's phonological, is the nature of their problem, you need to know a lot about the phonological end of this stuff, okay? And so that's our goal for tonight. Spelling, right? There's a real strong link between the phonological awareness and the spelling. You think about when you're trying to spell a word you don't know, you're sounding it out, right? What's the first part of that? Sound, right? You're sounding it out, okay? But if you have a phonological processing problem, hearing those sounds and discriminating those sounds is difficult for you, okay? All right, I love the National Reading Panel. I went through you guys, the survey from the beginning. I want to say like 4 of you have read this or parts of this, can you guys raise your hand? How many of you have see, one, two, three, 4, 5? The report of the National Reading Panel is available online. Okay, it used to be, you know, and until George Bush was elected, that you could, there was, every IEP I would go to, I had a Xerox, you could call this phone number and the government would mail you the report of the National Reading Panel. It'd show up in your mailbox at home, a 450-page report, okay? But now it's no longer available, the budget got slashed, but you can still download it as a PDF, and they have it split into sections. All the modern, all current reading curricula are organized around the findings of the National Reading Panel. That's where the big 5 things came from, right? Phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. Came straight out of that. Before this, you know, the idea was out there, but this is what set that in stone. I would add, they forgot one, writing, right? There's a real important one. There ought to be number 6. But I love the report of the National Reading Panel is I encourage you guys. So here goes with my, I'm going to try to keep them brief tonight. When I graduated from UNM, I got my degree, I went out to the out west to the Navajo Reservation to teach. None of the kids could read. I didn't know what to do. No one had prepared me to teach reading. I had a whole class of kids that couldn't read, not a couple, okay? This was in the late 90s, and so the internet was just coming around, right? I guess maybe some of you guys saw those ads with the Brian Gumbel, right? And what is the internet? You know, and that's kind of how I was back then. What is the internet? So I started, you know, I got access, and I started searching for resources on stuff. And eventually, in 2000, the report of the National Reading Panel came out, and it was online, and boy, it was like, somehow I ended up there, and it was like a gold mine, okay? I downloaded it, you know, this is back in the old days of the internet. I know 2000 doesn't sound that long ago, but it really was as far as the internet goes. And I printed it out, that thing page by page, you know, and I put it in binders. And then when I decided I wanted to be a diagnostician, I got into a program in Texas, and so I moved to Texas, and I was like you guys, and I was working as a teacher, and I had an assignment at the school. And I went in, I was an ESL reading teacher, and I went into the teacher's lounge one day, and there was, you know, the pile that's always in the teacher's lounge, like nobody wants the stuff, take it or it's going to get thrown away at the end of the week, right? Well, guess what was lying there? I'm not making this up, okay? In the discard pile was the report of the National Reading Panel, still wrapped in cellophane, unopened. All right? I get the, right? I couldn't believe it, so I still have my saved from the dumpster copy of the National Reading Panel, okay? This book is a monument, okay? And I don't want to take too long on this, but I implore you guys to read this book. What they did basically, and you'll read that when it's been a long time, it's been since, you know, 2001 since I had my hands on a hard copy. They said, we got to figure this out. We need science to inform reading instruction, not somebody's opinion and pseudoscience. We want real science. So they got over 100,000 studies, over 100,000 studies, I'm going to say that again, and they compiled them, and they said, we're going to analyze these studies, but these are educational studies, so maybe you know where the next sentence is going to be. Turns out more than 90,000 of them were improperly conducted, and the results were invalid. I'm not kidding, you read it right in the introduction to this, okay? So, but they still had some 10,000 or so studies. That's a lot, okay? That's a lot of studies that were properly conducted and did have valid scientific results, okay? That's what that is. They distilled those down into that book. Wow. Wow, there it is. It's solid gold that they, right? It's alchemy that they did that. And so I encourage you guys, it's a very, very rich document, okay? All right, so in here they did these meta-analysis. They only had 52 studies for phonemic awareness. Okay, so that's interesting to me because I thought, you know, I think they're up around 10,000 total for all 5 areas. So I suspect the comprehension is, you know, where they had a ton of them, right? And but so they had 52 different studies for phonemic awareness that they condensed into one. And so it's a real rich. My recommendations and my reports come straight out of the report of the National Reading Panel. Okay, because I don't want to recommend something that's you know, not good recommendations. And so I want sound recommendations. So maybe you guys, Sally Shaywitz, I'm sort of building you a little case around the phonemic awareness. She published the book that kind of, maybe it was 1998, I think it came out. What's the name of her? It's the dyslexia. What's it?
Overcoming dyslexia.
Overcoming dyslexia.
I have
Thank
to
you.
say, my husband's dyslexic, and he goes, "Why did they write a book with words about overcoming
Well,
dyslexia?"
well,
He was like,
right.
"People will tell me you need to read this
Well, the
book."
good-
And he's like,
The good thing I can tell you, and that's a wonderful point, that so Sally Shaywitz at Yale, they have a center, a dyslexia center. It's like dyslexia and creativity, or it has some, and giftedness, it has some add-on the name. I have it in my reports. They have a link to audio of some of her stuff. And so I'll put that in there to the families, because often the parents are dyslexic also. And so I drop that URL into my report, and I say, click on this and you can listen to this. And I think they're more likely to right, if you can.
more likely, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
right. And so that's a good question. There's so much evidence supporting, though, the phonemic awareness stuff, okay? And how that reciprocity between, once your phonemic awareness gets up to speed, and then the reading, and they start to reinforce each other. Okay. The GC, this is what I'm saying, where it's hard to pull any one thing out. So it's not just a decoding that you're decoding. Your phonological development also develops all these different areas on the GC. Your ability to attend to unfamiliar words. It's like when somebody's speaking, a language is new to you, you really have to attend to it to get the word. Okay. Repeating and pronouncing words correctly, that's a problem for a lot of dyslexic kids, right? They get tongue-tied and they get the syllables mixed up, okay? Remembering and encoding words accurately, encoding, that's the memory in the long term, right? So that they can be retrieved and used, all right? If you're storing that fuzzy, indistinct thing, remember my picture analogy, you've never seen this person before, and I put that down, and that what you stored was not really clear, okay? And so when your phonology is good, then when you are learning new words, okay, in your vocabulary, you get a much better representation of them. Their ability to differentiate words that sound similar, okay, there's a lot of phonological similarity stuff going on, and so words that are like that, the card and cart thing, okay, those two words, they only have one sound that's different, but they mean completely different things, and so you've got to be able to discriminate the sounds. Okay, is phonemic awareness a skill or is it a concept? Well, it's both, right? You've got to understand conceptually, that there are these individual sounds, okay? But then you can develop your skills at discriminating those sounds, manipulating those sounds, right? It's really both. You've got to understand the concept first, and once you've got that, then you can develop the phonological skills. All right. I want to point out Joe Torgerson. He's the author of the CTOP, or one of the authors of the CTOP, okay? And so, and he's really one of the I think one of the biggest experts on phonological stuff. Okay, so this, Peter, we were talking a little bit about this, explicit systematic instruction, okay? That's the key. If you have a phonological impairment, the regular level of instruction and the level of explicitness and the level of systematicness, like we're going to go from easy to more difficult systematically, is that the general curriculum is usually insufficient for those kids. And so they need much more, it needs to be much more explicit, where we're drawing their attention explicitly to these units, okay, of sound, okay, and letters, and we need to march them more explicitly or systematically from easy to more difficult, okay? That's what your reports, I hope, will say, because the kids you're going to be evaluating have those phonological impairments, okay? Nor typical instruction is not sufficient, okay? For those who need these concepts, explicit systematic instruction is necessary, okay? It's not an option. For them to move forward, it's a necessary part, okay? And that's the part that, like I say, it's your job is going to be to convince that teacher and the IEP committee to add those goals into the IEP. So who needs the phonemic awareness instruction? This is straight out of one of the readings from tonight, Marilyn Adams. 25% of middle class, and this is middle class first graders, and substantially more from less literacy-rich backgrounds or ESL, right? People who come from families that speak other languages. So even the kids from a middle-class English-only speaking family, 25% of those kids need extra instruction, all right? Most kids don't need, for the majority of kids, the regular curriculum is sufficient, but for 25% of the middle-class kids, they need that systematic, explicit instruction in order to master that concept and the skills.
This is the part that kind of puzzled me a little bit when I was reading it, because it seems like when my children were in school, and in kindergarten, they learned teach, train, and or whatever the hell, these signs and these
Right.
movements.
Right.
And it seems so explicit to me, but the reading is saying that still needs to be more explicit for even more kids.
Well, there's a couple things, and that's a great point. There's a couple things I'd say. One thing is, there are two parts to the equation, right? Explicit and systematic. You can be really explicit, but if you're just all over the map from difficult to easy to difficult, the kids get confused, right? Especially the kids with phonological impairments. So there's that one part, right? And the other thing I would say, it sounds like they were doing, to me, open court. And, not all curricula are created equal.
Okay, yeah, I
And
don't
not all teachers are created equal, not all schools are created equal, right? They might have had a good teacher in a good school where they were doing that, but open court has a thing where I taught open court, where they have these little for E for the hen, there's the hen pecking,
Yeah.
right? They have these little symbols, and I liked that, honestly.
Yeah.
I think that, especially those struggling, I did it when I was an ESL teacher, and those kids, I think it really helped them.
Yeah, I think it helped. It seemed like it was a really good thing, but then again, my son, I think, still struggles with this in fourth grade, and he got all the
Right.
little things.
Well, you
he's
see, and
supposed
that's,
to do, but
right, and that's what I say, that general curriculum. Open court, it sounds an awful lot like open court, maybe you guys know, could add in on that. Open court, if when I went to Texas, they had open court as the curriculum that I was given to teach, and I had no exposure to open court before that, but I had read the report of the National Reading Panel, and I had read Marilyn Adams. So I opened up my teacher's manual for open court, and who's right on the front page? Marilyn Adams. Yeah! Right? I couldn't believe it. Here the curriculum made, designed, but she was like the consultant, you know how that is, right? And then it went through the meat grinder making sausage thing, right, and it came out the other end, and so, did that make
so
sense?
so I'm guessing, I'm thinking that it works for most of the kids, but
Right.
there's always gonna be a certain
Absolutely.
percentage that just need more than even what seems to be very
Especially if
explicit.
you're dyslexic, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was gonna say, I use foundations a lot,
Mhm.
which probably most of you are familiar with, but
Mhm.
what I've noticed with my struggling readers is it does, T-topped.
Oh, that's
like-
one.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
foundations. Well, the struggling readers, when they go to sound out a word, they go T, top, t. They just need the sound.
Yeah,
So if they're trying to sound out like cat,
right.
we're going C, cat, k, A, apple, at. Do you know what I mean? Instead of the k, at, they're saying
You're
all
not blending
three.
it. Is it?
So when I start working with them, I'm like, no, you need just the sound, and we have to pull apart
Well,
Just
and
the
the
foundation.
open
all
court,
the, yeah.
open court, that's one of the things in the end, what I did is when I was a reading teacher, near the end of my tenure with that, I was doing some Saxon phonics and some open court and some SRA, right? And I kind of pulled the good parts from each of those. And what I loved about open court is they do explicit blending. Okay, you have this whole activity, sound, what's the sound, now blend it, and there's this a lesson cycle that you go through where the kids are used to the activity and you're putting in different sounds in each lesson, but it's the same,
Right.
format.
Well, and they still do that, but I just think some of our struggling readers get stuck. And they especially like dyslexic kids,
Yeah,
they
it's really
cannot
hard.
pull apart. They are very stuck on like saying the letter, the
Mhm.
keyword, the sound.
Going from individual sounds
Yes,
to blending is real
yes,
hard. for
and
them.
so they are still saying all three,
Right.
which is a problem with even the really systematic, like, ones that pull you
Yeah,
through.
yeah, right. I agree with that. That was my experience also. Okay, so maybe it was you, Sharon, somebody, one of the classes asked about the phoneme, does phonemic awareness help with language acquisition? Okay, and so here's some research on that. Older struggling readers benefit from, that was another question somebody had, well, isn't phonological stuff more for the lower guys, but once we get up here in high school and stuff, is it still gonna benefit them? So yes, it definitely does, okay? And then, and the English language learners also, okay? Pretty much everybody benefits from phonological. High kids that aren't dyslexic, guess what? They become great spellers, okay? And so nobody, then in my opinion, there's no harm done in really focusing on the phonological stuff, okay? So the majority, why is this phonemic awareness stuff critical? The majority of low readers, we saw that, right? 80% or more of them have a phonological awareness weakness or a phonological memory, okay? The sounds are co-articulated, right? So we don't, when we speak, we don't say the individual sounds. It takes some direct instruction and practice to link that up and to make that, make them aware of that. There's a lot of correlational studies, right? And it correlates with reading, and it's causal. It facilitates your reading acquisition. So the strongest predictor of early reading success is the phonological stuff. It's not your intelligence. Okay. Sally Shaywitz over there at Yale, she's got some great stuff where she published for non-dyslexic, for non-impaired, IQ and reading comprehension track. Okay, it's the same curve. They go hand in hand. Okay, you're real high IQ, your reading comprehension is going to be high. But for the dyslexic kids, IQ goes up and comprehension stays here. Okay, it's uncoupled, right? And so that's the thing too. I think that people need to understand. There's two distinct populations, as it were. I mean, they're not distinct, but there's non-phonologically impaired people and there's phonologically impaired, right? If you don't have a phonological impairment, your IQ is a very good predictor of your reading comprehension. But if you've got a phonological impairment, it's not. You can have a very high IQ and have very low reading comprehension. So this is where so now phonics, right? Phonics is where we're linking the letters. Okay, we're taking the sounds that we're aware of and we've been practicing, and the sounds of our language. What letters do we use to represent those in our alphabetic code, okay? So without phonemic awareness, phonics makes little sense. If the kid doesn't understand that our language is composed of a lot of individual sounds, then when the teacher's holding up these letters, you can see how it would be confusing for them, okay? Children who cannot hear and work with the phonemes of spoken words will have a difficult time learning how to relate these phonemes, those are the sounds, to the letters when they see them in written words. That's right. That's the core thing for a lot of these kids. Phonemic awareness. And here's the thing about the older kids. I think one of you guys, one of these previous classes has asked about that. Well, what about with the older kids? Measures of students' ability to attend and manipulate phonemes strongly correlates. So that means it's over 0.6. Okay, correlation with their reading success through grade 12. Okay, that's pretty much the end of your education, right? And so there you go. I don't believe that there's ever, if you have if you're scoring very low in phonology, it's never the wrong time to try to fix that. Okay, even up into high school. But I think it's very rare for high school kids to have phonological awareness goals, even if they still have a deficit there. And I want to, and Amy, and when I was out there on the reservation and struggling to figure it all out, before the report of the National Reading Panel came out, I ran into the SLP, the speech therapist, in the hall one day, and a conversation ensued, and she hooked me up with some of the Lindemood, and I don't know if any of you guys have taught this stuff. They have this program, LIPS. I don't know what the acronym stands for. Those guys are really great. I don't even know, Nancy Lindemood, and I don't know what but they have some really wonderful resources. We'll see in a minute. We're going to get to a couple. The first, there's a little YouTube video. There's a series. It's from this thing called Children of the Code. Has any of you ever been on Children of the Code? Children of the Code has interviews with all the video interviews with tons of these people. One of them, they have Nancy Lindemood on there. It's Lindemood and Bell, and I don't know what, maybe they're both Nancy, I don't know, but it's really worth your time to pursue those interviews. So what happens? What does it look like if you've got a phonological awareness deficit? Okay, the low students, they can't group words according to similar or dissimilar sounds. Okay, and these are the kind of things that you'll be measuring with the different tests. Okay, they have trouble blending and splitting syllables. Blending sounds, that's the one, right? That's really challenging for these kids, okay? Blending the sounds back together. A lot of, you'll get those kids, they see that letter and they know the sound that goes with that letter. And they each one, they know those, but when it's time to push them together and blend them, it's really hard for them. Segmenting also, you're right, the opposite. And that's what's measured, segmenting and blending is the big thing on the CTOP, okay? Okay, so here I want to do this, because I think, well, this is the good one. So this is from, this link, and so I encourage you guys to, on your own, to go to Children of the Code. There's interviews with well, I think what Children of the Code is, it's a website that was going to be a PBS documentary or a PBS series on reading, and somebody pulled the plug, right? So they had a lot of the videos already ready to go and all this stuff, and then it just died. Okay, and so the guy who did it, he made this website, and I think what he is some sort of technology guy, computer guy, who has some dyslexic kids, right? And he wasn't getting anywhere with the schools, and he's like, I'm just going to have to figure this out on my own. And so he went out and pursued this. So this lady, Paula Talal, she's at Rutgers. This is the one that really this cracked my head open, okay? This is really where, oh my God, now I think I understand phonemic awareness and how it relates to reading. And so I wanted to just play you. I apologize, it's 9 minutes, which is a little bit long for an interlude, but this lady, I think you'll agree, it's really worth it. So what I think is really interesting about that Nina Kraus thing, she said, and you saw it, she's got her website is called Brain Volts, like electricity volts, Brain Volts .Northwestern. And she's got a lot of really great stuff. Great, that whole speech that's called the Marion Downs lecture is really great. It's so good. But so she got all this great, real hardcore science demonstrating this. The dyslexic kids have trouble auditorily discriminating consonants. Okay, right? You saw that, right? You saw the little graphs and everything, the phasograms and all that stuff, right? Well, so consonants, right? But consonants, when you get over to the alphabet, to the spelling, the consonants are the easy part. That's the part that's not ambiguous. Basically each consonant has one sound, right? There's a few, but pretty much the consonants are one-to-one, right? That's the part the kids can hang their hat on. So orthographically, the consonant is my anchor. But auditorily, that's where auditorily the ambiguity is coming through the consonants. Orthographically, the ambiguity comes through the vowels. That's where all of our word goes haywire in English, is in the vowels. What's the perfect storm? The consonants are messed up over here, the vowels are messed up over here, what's left? Nothing, right? That's it. That's, to me, that right there, that's why these kids have so much, the really dyslexic kids, why it's so hard for them to progress. They're getting it from both directions, okay? They have phonological impairments, okay? And then the orthography is so messed up, okay? It's so, you know how all that. And so, okay, so I'm going to keep going then. I'm going to attempt to keep going. So, and then I'm going to try to stop in time so we can do some CTOP. So, in the second reading from Marilyn Adams, she talked about later on about, or no, I take that back. This is from the elusive phoneme, okay? So this was from the first one, about the structure of the language, okay? And I really keyed into this because when I started trying to figure out reading instruction, because your job is to diagnose the problems, right? But what's the other half of your job? Is to deliver the recommendations, right? What is the intervention that's going to fix this problem? That if I remember when Margaret and I first met, she goes, well, if all we can do is tell them where the problem is, we haven't done anything, right? We got to deliver the interventions too. And so I started, really looking into that. And what I found was there's a lot of research around that different programs work, different techniques work, but there's something about those different ones where they overlap. And what is it that they have in common? And what I found is that, and the research shows this, is that where those different curricula overlap is that they all focus on the structure of the language. The structure of the spoken language, the structure of the written language, okay? It can be Wilson, it can be Saxon, it can be Open Court, but if they focus on the structure of the language, you're a lot more likely to have success with them, okay? And so I like how So she said they need to acquire knowledge of the architecture of their language. That's the structure, right? And the nature of its building blocks. So there's the spoken part, right? Okay. Their attention needs to be focused and refocused. I love how she says that, right? Once is not enough, okay? On smaller and smaller parts. First, can you deal with the big pieces, the real easy, you know, the co-articulated pieces? Now we're going to work you down to smaller and smaller pieces. It's the same thing Paula Toll was talking about with Fast Forward. They stretch this, hers is this computer program, they actually stretch the sounds out, the individual sounds, to make them where they're longer lasting and they're more phonologically unique, okay? So she's talking, this is the structure of the language. Stories are built from sentences. Sentences are built from words. See how we're going structurally? Words from syllables, syllables from phonemes. That's how you work your way down to a finer and finer grain size, okay? Can you deal with the big pieces first? Now we're going to keep stepping our way down, okay? The teachers are not thinking like this, and their interventions are not designed like this. That's systematic and that's explicit as we work our way down through like that, okay? So if parts are omitted or substituted or rearranged, then the whole is altered, right? That makes perfect sense. Card and cart, right? If we take one part and change it, then the whole meaning of the whole thing changes, okay? And that's the difficult part, is that they can't deal with those small changes in there, auditorily, okay? Okay. I think, let's stop, is that?
Sure. And I think I'm gonna not set up my computer. The CTOP has several of the subtests that I'm just gonna kind of walk you through. It's on a disc, and you play the disc for the student, and you'll see what I mean when we get into this. But we're gonna be doing the CTOP in the next lab, and the Wyatt, I'm still building that lab, so don't go look, because it's not there yet. But, so I just want to give you a little introduction. We thought this was so important because it fits with what we're talking about tonight, and you'll see. The CTOP is actually a really easy test to learn, and it's really pretty simple. And they've made it really nice. You know how sometimes we have to haul a big kit around. It's basically, I have what you need right here for most of it. Brant has, did you bring the rapid naming? I didn't bring it over either. There's one little response booklet. Well, actually, and for the younger kids there, you do something out of that too. So just as structurally, there's a protocol for 6 and 7-year-olds, and then there's a protocol for, what, 7 to 24. I realize I'm all right, so broken down into 3 parts, really, and there are subtests for each part. And Brant talked about that. The first part is phonological awareness, what we've been talking about tonight. The second part is, they call it phonological memory, but it fits into our CHC category of short-term memory. And then the third part is rapid naming, and it fits into that long-term retrieval from CHC. So it really has 3 parts, but they're all phonological because it's all auditory. Well, the rapid naming is a combination. But what I want to do tonight is just briefly show you how the subtests, especially in the phonological awareness, follow what we just finished with, working down from the broader down to that narrow. And it's kind of cool how they developed it. They put all your instructions right on here. That's why you don't have an easel. You know, we did the WISC this weekend, and we're looking at the manual the whole time. All your directions are right on here. You just have this, and
They're very brief and easy.
very easy. And you know how, well, I always complain about the DOS because I can't pick out the colored directions, what I'm supposed to read. These just jump right out there at you, what you're gonna, and you'll see that when we do the lab. So this first one is, I never say it right, you say it.
I say elision.
Okay. I call it a lesion. I know that's not right, but what you say to the kid is, let's play a word game. Say toothbrush.
Toothbrush.
Now say toothbrush without saying tooth. That's right. They give a lot, I mean a lot, where you get to give feedback about That's right, where you tell them, you correct them. So there's a lot of teaching in this. You really want to make sure that the kid knows what you're trying to get them to do, because you want to measure the actual phonological awareness, not whether or not they can follow the directions. So we'll just work through it. That's right, let's try the next one. And actually on this one, you don't use a CD the whole time you're doing it. So say cowgirl.
Cowgirl.
Now say cowgirl without saying girl.
Cow.
Okay, say popcorn.
Popcorn.
Now say popcorn without saying corn. Okay, so we go down, you see those are all compound words, right? We're at a word level, like we were talking about up there. And then the very last one before you switch over to something else, say spider.
Spider.
Now say spider without saying der.
Spider.
So now have we dropped it down? We're down to the syllable level on that. But it's funny because they jump, oh, I guess there's a few others in there, but mainly they're compound words and then that one syllable. And then we go, okay, now let's try some more where we take away smaller parts of the words. Say cup. Now say cup without saying k. That's right. Let's try the next one. Say meat. Now say meat without saying t. That's correct. So I like 4 more, I give feedback. And then it continues to be, let's see, do we have any, those are all beginning sounds. And then let's see where it, okay, at item 16, say time.
Time.
Now say time without saying
Time.
okay? So it gets a little bit, you got the front end, which kids usually can get that better than the end. And so let's see, we do a couple end, and then it gets really complex. Say snail.
Snail.
Now say snail without saying
Snail.
That's where you find out if it makes them or break them on that one. It's really hard to pull up. And how it overlaps all of our different things. We talked about short-term memory, working memory. This subtest, I can see that working memory for these kids. They are struggling. They're saying it over in their mind. They're remembering it, and they're manipulating the sounds and the word. So it's a type of working memory. It's phonological in nature, and it's by sounds. But I can sometimes say, this kid actually, they got really some awesome working memory, and I'm not measuring working memory. And they may bomb the working memory test, but so I have to kind of balance that to say, you know, in some areas, they can actually hold that stuff in their mind and work with it. So
I think also the kids, some of the kids orthographically scaffold it.
Yeah,
They have
yeah.
some sense of the spelling, and so we want it to be a pure phonological test, but for the kids that already have some orthographic stuff stored, right, then they scaffold themselves, or I think on the second subtest especially, that they really, I don't even give the second subtest, because I feel like it's so heavily influenced by their orthographic stuff, and it's not a measure of orthography.
And so they actually built into this test nonsense words so that you couldn't use that orthographic scaffolding. And I've been tempted to use that. Have you ever thought about going to those subtests? They're in here. The blending, I'm not sure if it's got that. It's got segmenting non-words too.
Are they given time constraints?
Nope, not on this. Okay, so you get that? That's the splitting off of sounds, right? That's tends to be, in my experience, this is a harder task than the blending. Because we're teaching kids phonics all the time, and remember how Branch talked about they help each other. That phonological awareness and the learning to read, they go back and forth, you know. A lot of ways kids even learn phonological awareness is through systematic, explicit phonics instruction, even if they didn't get any specific instruction in the phonological part. Does that make sense? Because you're having to hook those sounds onto letters, and kids start realizing, oh, these sounds can be split up, and this word is made up of these different sounds. Jump in anytime, Brent. Okay, blending words is the second subtest. So on this one, you'll hear some words in small parts, one part at a time. I want you to listen carefully and then put these parts together to make a whole word. Ready? Let's try one. Cow, boy. What word do these sounds make? That's correct.
And this
That's
one's on
right.
the CD. You play the
Yeah.
CD, so it does it standardizes the pronunciation and standardizes the speed of articulation.
Although in the beginning, what you're doing, it is oral, the ones I'm doing right now, and then it says you'll listen to the recording. So at the beginning, and again, you see it's a compound word. A little bit, it's that higher level we were talking about. What word do these sounds make? See, shell. That's correct, or that's right. What word do these sounds make? Skate, board. That's right. What word do these sounds make? Can, D. So now you see we've brought it down to the syllable level. So you're working your way through. Where does the CD start? Oh, it is right from the get-go. Because it says tracks 1 to 33. Well, you'll see when you get there. I give this up. I mean, I've probably given this test 500 times at least. You'd think I'd know it by heart, but this one you definitely use a CD. Okay, so it goes for a while. Let's see, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are still syllables. And then when you get to number 9, okay, now let's try some more where we say even smaller parts of the words, one part at a time. I want you to listen carefully and then put these parts together to make a whole word. Ready? Let's try one. So then you're using the recording. And I've uploaded the CD to iTunes, and in the next class, all you that are going to be in the next class, we're going to actually use the computer to do the subtests. And I was trying it, just uploading to what I had on my computer, and it didn't load well to find the tracks you need. If you download iTunes, it doesn't cost anything. You can put these in, and they actually label each one. It tells you which item, it tells you which subtest. It's incredible, it's really great. I have peers, again, you all know I don't have a cell phone. I have friends who have uploaded it to iTunes. They take their cell phone, they do their timing subtest with their cell phone, and they do these with their cell phone. As long as you have a speaker loud enough that'll, the kid can hear it. Okay, so we switch over, and again, it'll be the CD or however you have it electronically. It'll, at this point in time, you stop saying what word do these sounds make, because they kind of got that, it would say s, un. And it's interesting, the kids with phonological awareness problems, they struggle with that, pulling them together. It's really difficult for them, even simple ones like that. So you go for a while where it's just, or a couple with just two parts like t, ache, o, and then it goes d. So it gets more complex, and down later, it's like, it blows me away, the kids that get these, like d, s, t, d. Got it? And they have determination, configuration, acquisitiveness. I'm glad that they have the CD when I get to that one. Okay, and which one do you usually skip? You said the third one?
We have the isolation.
So you don't worry about getting a cluster score then?
I just do, in the back of the manual, you can get a 2-score phonological composite or a 3-score. They have the table set up, so you can do it either way. This is just funny, because what do I always tell you about learning a new test?
Read the manual.
I didn't know you could do that, so I must not have read far enough in the manual to do that. Now I know.
Yeah, so in the back on the table, it says, do you want to do it at a 2-score or a 3-score? And I always just do the 2.
Because this next one is wicked hard.
Yeah.
It's just, now we're going to do a word game where I will ask you to say parts of words. The word man has 3 sounds. Man. What is the first sound, the one in the beginning in the word man? And they'll sometimes say M, and you go, no, what is the sound? Because they're attached to the orthography, which tells you something, so I'm writing on there. They needed that scaffolding with the letter to remember that sound. Kind of what you were talking about, the word, the letter, or how a letter word sound thing. They get hooked on that, and they have to use that. So it gets later on. I'm so glad. I hate the subtest. I'm glad to know I don't have to give it anymore.
You have my permission.
Because actually kids go very long on it and I feel like I've been tortured, you know, so.
I think if some, I can't remember some of the later ones, you know, maybe you could pick one of those ones out where they're having to take a consonant out of the middle of a consonant blend. The kids are sitting there, you can just see them in their head, they're going through the letters, they're not doing it phonologically, they're doing it orthographically.
So that's why you don't use it.
Well, it's supposed to be a phonological measure, but if it's getting all this interference from orthography, then which one am I getting, which score is it, right?
So, yeah, later on, it's like the word, it's not what Brant was pointing out, but just to show you an example, the word frog also has 4 sounds. G. What is the third sound in the word frog? And again, this is where I'm looking at that working memory. Can they hold it there and count out? And again, some of the working memory tests we give, like on the whisk or on the woodcock, they might do really poorly, but sometimes they can do this. It's just really, I'm looking for evidence wherever I can find it. It's not technically measuring working memory, but if they can do this task, it tells me they have some working memory. Even if they're scaffolding with the letters, because then they're searching the long-term memory to get the sound with the letter, so they're really doing a pretty complex memory task to be able to do this. So those are the 3 subtests, but actually, I like it. You can get a score for the 2. Well, I don't know if you're going to come when we do that lab. Do you want to talk about the difference, how you interpret the difference between those 2? So the one is where we're dropping sounds out, and one is where we're blending. Do you notice anything, or how do you interpret that difference?
In my experience, the segmenting, the first one, the subtest 1, where they have to take the words apart. That's the one, because on that one I give them the whole word and then they have to segment it. That one, for me, seems to correlate more strongly with the reading impairment, because they have to get in there and discriminate the sound. I'm giving them the whole co-articulated thing, and they've got to get in there and find the individual sound. Whereas on the blending, on the second subtest, I already discriminated each sound, okay, and I give them the individual sounds pre-discriminated. And so they have to remember them, and that gets back to that short-term working memory. They got to hold on to them and blend them back together. And so kids definitely do have blending weaknesses also. In my experience, though, it's been more, I see it more, but again, it goes, I think, district by district. Some districts are hitting the phonemic awareness better. APS is, I believe, with the foundations. And Rio Rancho is not. They don't have a phonemic awareness curriculum. It is not an adoption, for one. And so, in my experience, those kids, that they're worse on the segmentation side. But you see the difference. On one, they're having to discriminate out of a co-articulated burst, and on the other one, I've already discriminated it for them. And so that's how I sort of split the waters there.
And it's interesting, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I swear that every time I read Mather, she talks about that segmenting part is related to spelling a lot. You know, because you're taking, because you're hearing the word together and you've got to break it apart to spell it. And then the reading, we're teaching phonics, we're teaching them to blend sounds together. So she always talks about that. I mean, I haven't really seen it in my practice where it's one goes with one and the other goes with the other, but it's just interesting, someone that really knows this field well says that that's kind of how she breaks it down.
So when it comes to interpreting, like phonological awareness, I thought you said earlier, was there's different kinds of problems you could have with phonology. So would we be, so from this test, can we tell which problems they have with phonology, or do we say, okay, now let's let the speech and language person help out, or?
That's it's really a great question. You guys have great questions. And I think you've seen it. We learn from your questions. I mean, we've been doing this forever, but the tests are new, and then there's always something more to learn, right? In the back, somewhere in here in the manual, Torgerson says it would be a tremendous mistake to make a diagnosis based on one subtest.
Yeah.
Right? So you know, for me, what I think about, you know, there's other things, like on the Wyatt, there's some segmenting and blending also, so I'll be looking at those scores. And then for me, what I look at is academic skills that are dependent on phonological awareness, or phonemic awareness. How are they in those skills? So if I get a low score over here on the C-top in the phonemic awareness, and then is there early reading and decoding, and are those skills also low? Because those would support each other. Does that make sense? So you're not just hanging your hat on one score from this. It's this, and then what about those skills that this is supposed to be correlated with also?
And then how about like dyslexia? Who finally says dyslexia? Do we say it?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
And there's all different kinds of dyslexia. Isn't it a spectrum? I mean, there's like different,
Not really.
no?
Yeah.
It's a lot simpler than people make it out
Oh,
to
really?
be,
Okay.
in my opinion.
I mean, it's mostly phonological impairment. You know, there's some studies that Shaywitz did at Yale where they subtyped dyslexia, like you're saying, and they came up with 6 subtypes. There's been a couple of Reed Lyon and different people have done these subtyping things, but they've all come up with, like on Shaywitz, 5 of the 6 subtypes have a phonological core, right? So it's primarily a phonological impairment. And so there are some kids that, you know, I think of dyslexia as an impairment in decoding and spelling primarily, right? It's a code-based thing. Okay, that can go on and affect comprehension and vocabulary and other things, right, and fluency. But the root problem is that you're not automatic with the code, right? Because of that, you can't decode and spell very well. To me, that's the root of dyslexia. Some kids, there's a few kids that have scotopic sensitivity or other things. You know, there are other ways to be a poor decoder, but primarily it's phonological.
And here's the good news. Later on, we're going to talk a lot more about dyslexia in this class. Well, Brant will. When Torgerson and these folks built this test, though, they were kind of looking at that because the deficit areas that typically correspond to dyslexia are this phonological awareness, and they call this whole test the test of phonological processing. So it's an umbrella term. And so those first 3 we just looked at are phonological awareness. The next 2 they call phonological memory, or for us it's short-term memory, but it's all phonological in nature, and we'll look at those real briefly here. And then the third one is rapid naming. And you're probably going to talk about dual deficit, the dual deficit model later. Double deficit. It's a theory about dyslexia, and it's kids that have the trouble with rapid naming and the phonological awareness. They're the most resistant to learning how to read. Yeah, it might have been in one of the readings already. So more will come with that, but you know, the foundation, I know Brant built this to talk about phonological awareness first is because, what again, 80% of the referrals are for reading, you know, problems. 80% of those 80% referrals, you know, are phonological in nature. So let's just briefly look at the 2 phonological memory subtests, and one will look very familiar after Saturday. On this one, you'll hear some numbers, one after another. After you hear the numbers, I want you to say them in the same order that you heard them. Listen carefully because I can't repeat the numbers. Let's try a couple for practice. The reason it's important to use the CD or uploaded CD or however you do it is what was the break on the whisk when we did them? 1 per second. They do 2 per second. And it makes a big difference. It's incredible. When I first thought, what difference would that make? And it really does. You can see differences with kids on this. And Brant and I were talking about that. I did some reading on it just because I was trying to figure that out. They said just even with a 1 second pause between, there's a little bit of time for rehearsal. And so it becomes a short-term memory thing. Even though it's digits and it's got a meaningful, I mean, you can attach a meaning to a digit, they're so fast that you almost have to hear the burst of sounds, you know, of the individual, you know. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know, that's just what I read, and I don't know if that's ever been proven, but that's sort of, when you read the CTOP manual, that's how they explain why they did it so tightly like that. But the next subtest is the one that really, to me, is truly phonological memory. I mean, it really, this one, for a long time, I wasn't doing the whole cluster here, I was just doing this subtest, because I was doing number repetition on the KBC is what I was given. They already had that subtest, it was like, yeah, it's 1 per second, but really, aren't they measuring the same thing? On this one, I want you to listen to some made-up words. After you hear each made-up word, I want you to say it exactly as you heard it, and as clearly as you can. Even if it's hard to say, give it your best try. Listen carefully because I can't repeat the words, okay? Let's try some. So, and again, this is where you want to play the CD. You don't want to have to be saying these words. Although I've done it when the CD is broken. I mean, I do the best I can. So, RAL. That's right. Now try the next word. SART.
SART.
Okay. Let me try to, I love some of these words. I like wake up at night and sometimes hear them. That's a beautiful word. Woolanawup. I don't even know if I can say all these. T-Bud-I-Shalt. So you see, they're not like a typical English word, so you're really having to hear the phonological. And you can break it in, you can hear the syllables in these. I mean, there are breaks that will help with that, but it's so unusual that usually it's really measuring, did they hear it all? Can they hold it and give it back to you exactly what they heard? To me, that's really phonological memory. Whereas even though they say that those numbers are so fast that it's that phonic, to me it's still, you can attach meaning to those numbers,
The numbers you've already got automated.
Yeah, yeah. But this is a completely different task, so you really have to, it's all auditory, it's all phonological memory. I think, I don't know what we're going to do on the next lab. I may have to I just taught you the C-top, so I don't know what we're going to do. But,
It's real easy.
yeah. Anything else, Grant?
Well, then, let me just merge on good, and I promise.
Oh, I didn't know you had more. I wouldn't have taken up so much time.
No. So I promise we'll stop at 6:45. You've heard that before though, right? So here was part, I put this like this one I just dropped out of a report, right? So I put on here, this was talking about his C-top, his score of 88, 21st percentile, blah, 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 right? And so I think it's important, and I like this. I put this in here. A target goal. So I'm not just saying that that he's got a problem, and I'm not just saying that that you could do this or that as an instructional sequence to get there, but that I like to put this in here. I'm confident based on primarily on the Dibbles research. Dibbles has gigantic data sets, tens of thousands of kids. Their norm samples, they're not 2,000, 3,100, they're 10,000, okay? Their norm samples are giant. And what theirs, they have their cut scores, the low risk, the at risk, and what's the, I don't even know what I guess that's the low risk and the at risk, and I guess there's some risk in between. The low risk is set at 40th percentile. What they found is that if you're at 40th percentile nationally, right, compared to the norm group, the giant norm group, that you have a greater than 80% chance of meeting your next higher literacy goal. Okay, that's a pretty good odds. You have a better than 80% chance of meeting it. I like that kind of thing. It's not just something I made up. It's based on norm. Well, I'm a diagnostician, right? It's based statistically on these giant norm samples. Okay. So based on that, I say, if you can hit 40th percentile, you are good to go. I'm real confident. Their other one, the 20th percentile, okay, that's their at-risk one. What that is the opposite. When they analyzed their data set, they found at 20th percentile, you have a greater than 80% chance of not meeting your next literacy goal. Okay? That's clear language that families can understand, that I think everybody can understand. In between, okay, it's about 50-50. Between 40 and 20, about half the kids in there can make it and half of them don't. And so I think that's an important point.
I just want to back up because this is so important, and because I have the background knowledge to look at it. like in APS, they say 85 and below, that 88, you know, and 85 is below that 88. They're saying it's gotta be that low before you can say it's a deficit.
Yeah.
But what Brant's saying is it's higher than that, that's gonna cause a kid to not progress in reading.
88's 21st percentile?
Yeah,
Right, so you see how that kid, the 20th percentile, according to that Dibbles research, 20th percentile, you have greater than 80% chance of not meeting your next literacy goal. So
and
do I
85
think-
is a 16 percentile, so it's lower than that 20.
Right, and so you see, I have a hard time with that. You know, when a kid's at the 21st percentile, I say, oh, you're good to go? Probably not, okay? Yeah, right, you're probably not good to go on that. So thank you for pointing that out. So this, I put this in here. This is from the Wyatt, and we'll see this when we do our Wyatt. This, if you do the item analysis, so you go in and you don't just say, yeah, they got this many right or this many wrong. You actually go in and there's this item analysis tab on there, and you can say, okay, they missed number 3, which is an initial sound. They missed number 7, which is a final sound. And you can do this item analysis. It takes a little bit of time. But if you do that, if you go ahead and you don't have to do every subtest, like I'll focus on certain ones, the early reading skills one primarily, right? If you do that, you go doink, and it spits out a list of goals based on that specific item analysis. Johnny missed this one, and he got that one, and he missed that one. Okay, it'll spit them out. There's exactly what the IEP needs. My only problem with this is that I don't feel like they have a strong enough item representation, like to say, okay, they can't do initial consonant blends. Well, they might have only had 3 attempts, right? You see what I'm saying? I don't know that it's a representative sample, and so I'm a little hesitant, but I just wanted to show that to you guys, and that is an option for you right there. Then you can just take these, cut and paste them right into your report and your recommendations. Okay? Here's an activity, here's some goals. And so I just printed out, they have long-term goals, they have short-term, okay? It's something that I think is helpful. There's a lot of teachers that cannot take a goal to this level. They're not going to understand, you know, what would be an appropriate goal based on these findings from this report. And so you can just drop them right in there. What I've done also, just printed it as a supplement, just handed it to the teacher and say, you know, instead of adding it into the report. So all these came from that same kid from there, right? Based on his. Let's stop. Let's stop there. Next week, I've said it several times now. Next week we're going into the deep. I like Paula Talal in there when she said, and maybe Nina Krauss, she said, you got to have a distinct, the group of neurons that's firing and it's not moving around, you know. For the same signal, you should fire the same set of neurons. And so next week is where we kind of get into the neural processing and the neural nets and stuff. And so to me, that's really the core. We've got to go down to that level because that's what you're using for your learning. Okay? And so get started because it's 2 chapters. Chapter 6 is the one I'm going to mostly focus on, but I also want to talk about chapter 9. But chapter 6, the orthographic processing, there's a lot of information in there, and so you can't just hurry through it. All right, thank you.
On